Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The night my husband looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You are not my wife anymore," he thought he had already won. He packed 2 suitcases, smiled like a conqueror, and walked out of our house in Oak Park with another woman waiting in the car outside. On the 3rd day, he drove out to the lake house near Lake Geneva, expecting the iron gate to swing open the way it always had. Instead, the gate stayed shut, cold and silent under the afternoon sun. I watched from the balcony as he pounded the iron bars and jabbed at the intercom until his knuckles turned red. Then I pressed the button beside me, kept my voice calm, and said the 5 words he had earned. "You are the one who left. My name is Felicia Grant, and I am 42 years old. I trained as an architect, but for most of my adult life I made my real money in real estate investments. Almost no one outside my closest circle knew that second part. I dressed simply, drove an unremarkable sedan, and preferred an afternoon with blueprints spread across the kitchen table to any spotlight Chicago society could offer. At dinner parties, people often assumed I was only Warren Price's quiet wife, the woman who kept the house pleasant while he argued cases downtown and shook hands on Michigan Avenue. I rarely corrected them. At first, it was peace. Later, it became information. People reveal much more when they think you have no power. I inherited my first real money at 21, after my parents passed within 2 years of each other. They had been careful people, never flashy, never careless, and they left me more than accounts and property. They left me habits. I bought the land by the lake when I was still young enough for people to call me foolish for wanting something so remote. The shoreline was quiet then, not yet crowded with executives and developers. I met Warren when I was 23, married him when I was 24, and by then the land, the first small cottage on it, and the accounts that supported it were already in my name alone. Warren was 26 when we married, sharp, handsome, articulate, and hungry for a life bigger than the one he had known. He could walk into a room and make people believe he belonged at the head of the table even before anyone offered him a chair. I believed in him before his firm did. I listened to practice arguments until midnight. I hosted dinners for judges, partners, and clients who later praised him for being polished, never knowing how many place cards, menu changes, and careful seating decisions had happened because of me. I did not call it sacrifice. I called it partnership, and for a long time I meant it. 8 years into our marriage, when I was in my early 30s, I turned down 2 major design commissions that might have changed my public career. Warren was preparing for a brutal run of trials, and he needed the home front quiet. I told myself my time would come later. I managed the house, handled the social calendar, protected his sleep, and listened when he came home furious from court. He became a partner in his late 30s, then one of the most sought-after litigators in Chicago by his mid-40s. His name could cool a negotiation before it started. I was proud of him, until pride became a room he locked me out of. The change did not arrive all at once. It came in small tones, in glances that passed over me, in jokes he did not correct when colleagues called me lucky. He stopped asking about my day. When he spoke to me, he sounded as though he were giving instructions to staff. At private dinners, he described the lake house as something he had built for his family, never mentioning that I had bought the land before we met and rebuilt the cottage into a true lake house with inherited funds and investment income. He spoke of his salary as the foundation of our comfort, while I sat beside him knowing every major renovation, tax payment, insurance bill, and repair had come from my separate accounts. I let him talk because I wanted to see how far he would go. I had never hidden my ownership from shame or deception. The deed had existed before our marriage. The property manager had my signature on every authorization. The investment company had been formed 5 years before our wedding and capitalized with inherited funds. Warren had access to comfort, not control, and because comfort came easily, he never examined the source. He ignored the administrative details, tossed unopened property notices onto my desk, and treated every quiet payment I made as proof that his life simply functioned because he was important. One evening, months before the final break, he said something I carried like a stone. We were arguing about a charity dinner he wanted me to organize on 3 days' notice. I told him I had a meeting with a contractor in Milwaukee and could not rearrange everything again. He looked at me with open disgust and said, "Without me, you are nothing." He said it as if he were reading a fact from a document. I did not shout. I did not cry. I watched him loosen his cuff links, satisfied with his cruelty, and I filed the sentence away somewhere quiet and permanent. Around that same time, Janessa Whitfield became a constant presence in his life. She worked at his firm, had ambition sharpened to a point, and made no effort to respect the fact that Warren was married. Her messages arrived after midnight, during Sunday brunch, and once while he sat across from me at our anniversary dinner. He angled his phone away from me, but arrogance makes people careless. One night his tablet lit up on the kitchen counter while he was upstairs, and I saw enough before the screen dimmed. Janessa had written, "Stop apologizing to her. Make her understand she has been living off you. Once she feels small enough, she will sign whatever you put in front of her." I did not touch the tablet. I did not need to. A week later, I saw a calendar entry appear on a shared household schedule Warren had forgotten was still connected to my account. It was labeled Lake Weekend Reset, with Janessa's initials beside it and a note that read, "Bring overnight bag. Talk asset strategy." That was when I understood she was not simply waiting in the background. She was helping him rehearse his exit. She wanted the house, the status, the dinners, the smooth surface of the life she thought he owned. She had even drafted a list titled Pressure Points, including my age, my quiet nature, and what she called my fear of public embarrassment. I sent Marlene screenshots from the shared calendar and told her about the tablet. Because I had not opened Warren's private accounts or guessed passwords, she told me exactly what to preserve and what to leave alone. "Do not become messy because they were messy," she said. "Clean hands matter." That became my rule. I did not chase them, threaten them, or call anyone at his firm. I kept records of what had come to me through shared devices, shared calendars, and messages Warren himself had left exposed. It was enough. The worst betrayal was not hidden in one secret kiss or one late hotel bill. It was in the plan. They were not only leaving me behind. They were discussing how to corner me, frighten me, and make me sign away a life they had not built. The night everything broke was a Wednesday. Warren came home after 10 o'clock, tie loosened, phone buzzing against the counter. I asked him plainly if he was having an affair with Janessa. His expression changed, not into guilt, but into relief, as if I had finally handed him the scene he had been waiting to perform. He told me I had never understood what it meant to build anything. He said I had spent 2 decades coasting on his comfort, smiling at his guests, and contributing nothing of real consequence. I reminded him of the years I had given to his career and the life we had carried together. He laughed once softly, and it was uglier than shouting. "You are not my wife anymore," Warren said. The words landed in the kitchen like glass breaking. No judge had spoken. No petition had been filed. No settlement had been drafted. It was only my husband standing in the home I had made peaceful for him, declaring 20 years dead because he wanted his freedom to look powerful instead of dirty. Then he went upstairs and packed 2 suitcases with the efficient calm of a man who had been planning the moment for weeks. He did not search drawers or hesitate over shirts. Everything was already half chosen. Watching him, I understood the argument had not caused his departure. It had only given him permission to stop pretending it was sudden. Outside, a car waited in the driveway with its headlights cutting through the dark. Janessa sat behind the wheel. When Warren opened the passenger door, she leaned across and said something that made him smile. It was an easy smile, the kind shared by people who believe the hard part is behind them. I stood at the window until the taillights disappeared down the street. Then I locked the door, went upstairs, and slept for 4 hours without dreaming. By morning, pain had not left me, but it had become organized. I texted one sentence to Marlene Whitaker, my mother's old friend, my attorney, and the woman who knew the full architecture of my finances. Warren left last night. Marlene called within minutes. She had practiced law for more than 40 years, and her voice carried the steadiness of someone who had stopped being surprised by human selfishness. I told her what Warren said, what I had seen on the tablet, and what Janessa had helped him plan. Only then did Marlene ask, "Are you ready?" I looked around the kitchen where Warren had reduced our marriage to a sentence and answered, "It is time." There was no drama in the words. There was no revenge in them either. There was only the sound of a door inside me closing for good. Before noon, I changed every entry code at the lake house. I updated the security authorization, emergency contacts, access permissions, property management records, and guest approvals. My name had always been the only name on the deed, so there was no ownership document to change, only the careless permissions of a life I had allowed Warren to enjoy. I called Otis Caldwell, who had managed the grounds for nearly 15 years. Otis had overseen dock repairs, roof work, landscaping, and seasonal staff. He knew whose approval mattered because every invoice had passed through me. My instruction was simple. No one enters without my approval, I said. Not Warren. Not anyone with him. Otis said, "Understood, Miss Grant," and he meant it. On Saturday afternoon, Warren called the lake house and told the staff he was coming to collect belongings he had left behind. That was the excuse. The truth came later through messages Marlene preserved from the tablet backup. Janessa had told him, "We should spend the weekend there before lawyers make everything tense. Let her see that you have moved on inside the place she thought was hers." Warren replied, "She will calm down once she remembers who paid for her life." They planned to open wine on my balcony, sleep in my bedroom, and take photographs by my water as if humiliation were a ribbon they could tie around my throat. He arrived behind the wheel of his Mercedes, with Janessa in the passenger seat wearing sunglasses too large for her face and confidence too thin to survive facts. The lake house sat beyond a long stone driveway, visible from the road because the land rose gently toward the house. The iron gate stood at the bottom, with the intercom mounted beside it. From the second-floor balcony above the front entrance, I could see the gate clearly, and the intercom carried sound both ways across the property. Warren punched in the 6-digit code he had used for years. Nothing happened. He tried again, slower. The gate did not move. He laughed at first, irritated and theatrical. Then he called Otis. I could not hear Otis's voice from the balcony, but I heard Warren's tone sharpen. "Open the gate," Warren said. "This is ridiculous." A pause followed. Then Warren stiffened. Otis had told him exactly what I instructed him to say. "I work for Miss Grant." Warren tried to make it sound like a misunderstanding, then a favor, then an order. Otis did not bend. Janessa lowered her sunglasses, her smile weakening as she watched the man who had promised her ease argue with a locked gate. Warren stepped out of the car and walked to the iron bars. He pressed the intercom again and again. "Felicia," he shouted, "open this gate." I let him shout long enough for his own voice to embarrass him. Then I stepped onto the balcony. The late afternoon sun was behind the house, so he had to look up without the comfort of shadow. For a moment, he stopped moving. I think he expected tears or rage or pleading. I gave him none of it. "Open my house," he called, reaching for the authority he had worn so well for so many years. I leaned toward the intercom and said, quiet and precise, "Your house?" Janessa got out of the car then, no longer pretending to be only a passenger. "Warren, handle this," she said, loud enough for the intercom to catch. "You said she would be emotional, not difficult." The sentence cut through the air with its own ugly clarity. Warren shot her a look, but she kept going because people who enter a betrayal as partners often feel entitled to management rights. "Tell her we are not leaving," she said. "She cannot lock you out of your own place." I watched him absorb the humiliation of being pushed by the woman he had brought to replace me while the gate refused to obey either of them. His face tightened. "Do not do this in front of her," he said, glancing toward Janessa. That was the first honest thing he had said all week. He did not care that he had betrayed me. He cared that his audience might watch him lose. I had Otis send a copy of the deed to Warren's phone and to Janessa's email, because she had made herself part of the plan and deserved to read the ending. Warren's phone buzzed in his hand. I watched him open the file. He recognized it as a deed immediately, even if he had never bothered to study that specific document before. At the top, beneath the legal description of the land and structures, one owner of record appeared, Felicia Grant. "There has to be a mistake," he said, but his voice had already changed. "I contributed to this place for 20 years. "No," I said. "You enjoyed it for nearly 20 summers. I paid the taxes, insurance, repairs, renovations, ground staff, dock work, roof replacement, and security upgrades from accounts that existed before you married me. You signed guest books and gave tours." Janessa stepped closer to him and whispered sharply, but the intercom caught enough for me to hear. "You told me it was yours." Warren turned on her for half a second, then remembered I was watching and faced the gate again. "Felicia, we can discuss this like adults," he said. "You chose not to do that on Wednesday night," I answered. "You stood in our kitchen and told me I was not your wife anymore. You walked out with her waiting in the driveway. You came here today with an overnight bag and a plan to make a performance out of replacing me. So I am agreeing with you." He gripped the bars and said my name as if it still gave him access. I pressed the intercom once more. "You are the one who left. This time the exact words settled over the driveway, the car, the woman beside him, and the life he had mistaken for his own. He stayed another 15 minutes, moving from anger to bargaining to disbelief. Janessa became less patient with every minute. She reminded him, in a voice no longer soft, that he had promised the lake house would be part of their future. She said she had turned down another opportunity at the firm because he told her his divorce would be simple and profitable. She said, "You made me look foolish." That sentence revealed more than she intended. They had not been building love. They had been dividing spoils. When they finally drove away, Warren was no longer smiling, and Janessa sat angled toward the passenger window, already separating herself from his failure. That evening, I sat on the balcony and let myself breathe. I thought about my parents, who had taught me that wealth did not need applause to be real. I thought about signing the first papers for that land at 21. Hands steady even though everyone around me said patience was not exciting. I thought about the cottage I renovated room by room until it became the lake house Warren later praised himself for building. The betrayal hurt, but it did not destroy the structure beneath me. I had made sure of that long before I knew why I would need to. Before I went inside that evening, Otis called from the gatehouse and asked if I wanted the security recording preserved. I almost said no, because a part of me wanted the scene to disappear with the sound of Warren's engine. Then I remembered Janessa's message about pressure points and Warren's confidence that I would fold if I felt embarrassed. "Save everything," I told him. "The calls, the intercom audio, and the gate camera footage." Otis said he already had. That was the kind of loyalty Warren had never understood. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was built through years of paying people fairly, speaking to them with respect, and never treating them as props in my life. Within a week, Warren retained Russell Benton, a divorce attorney with a polished office in downtown Chicago and the misfortune of trusting his client's first version of the truth. Russell's early confidence came from Warren's story, not the documents. Warren claimed the lake house had functioned as marital property, that my investments had grown during the marriage, and that he had made sacrifices of his own by being the public earner. Marlene responded formally, not through gossip or back channels. She produced the deed, purchase records, trust documents, company formation papers, separate account statements, maintenance payments, and years of records showing that no marital funds had supported the lake house or the investment company. Marlene never told me the law was magic. She said, "No case is won by outrage, Felicia. It is won by evidence." The evidence was patient and complete. The land purchase predated Warren. The cottage renovation was funded from inherited capital. The investment company was formed before the wedding, managed through separate accounts, and documented with a discipline Warren had always considered boring. The trust had terms designed to preserve separate property, and I had not blurred those lines to rescue his ego. Ordinary marital assets would be handled fairly. Shared checking, vehicles, household items, tax matters, and any jointly accumulated retirement interests. I was not chasing his earnings. I was protecting what had never been his. The documents did what emotion could not. They made performance useless. Russell's tone changed after reviewing them. He advised Warren to settle rather than build a public fight around claims contradicted by dates, deeds, and bank records. The more Warren pushed, the more questions followed. His firm's managing partners learned enough through internal conflict reviews and professional whispers to wonder how one of their strongest trial lawyers had failed to understand his own position before threatening litigation. He had built a reputation on judgment. Now people who once admired his certainty spoke carefully around him, as if his confidence had become a liability. Janessa's part did not stay invisible either. She had used firm email to send Warren notes about asset pressure, and had boasted to 2 colleagues that she would soon be hosting clients at the lake house. When the documents proved the property was mine, those same colleagues stopped laughing with her. Someone forwarded one of her careless messages to Human Resources, and while no one announced the details publicly, her calendar emptied in ways ambitious people understand immediately. Invitations stopped. Partners who once praised her initiative began asking why she had involved herself in a senior attorney's marriage and whether her judgment could be trusted with clients. Warren called me 2 weeks after the gate. His voice had lost the sharpness that once entered every room before he did. He asked to meet in person, just the 2 of us, somewhere quiet. I chose a small cafe in Hyde Park near the office of my investment company, a place he had rarely visited because he never believed my work there was important. When he arrived, he looked smaller, not physically, but in the way a man looks when the story he tells about himself has stopped protecting him. He apologized. To his credit, the apology sounded real. He said success had distorted him. He said he had been cruel. He said Janessa had fed his worst thoughts, but he knew he had chosen to believe them. The first mediation session proved how far Warren's story had traveled ahead of the truth. Russell arrived with a folder full of arguments about marital lifestyle, expectation, and contribution. Marlene arrived with 3 binders, each tabbed by date. When Russell suggested that Warren's presence at the lake house made it functionally shared, Marlene opened to the property ledger and slid over 15 years of payments from my separate account. When he mentioned improvements made during the marriage, she produced contractor agreements signed by me and paid with inherited funds. When he implied Warren's public role had increased the property's social value, Marlene looked at him over her glasses and said, "Popularity is not equity." Even Russell had the good sense not to repeat that argument. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I asked, "Do you miss me or do you miss the house?" He opened his mouth quickly, ready to argue the question like a hostile witness, but no answer came. His silence sat between us, plain and final. Then he said very quietly, "I miss the way my life felt when you were in it." I said, "That is not the same thing." His eyes lowered. "I know," he said. "I wanted the comfort. I wanted the image. I wanted people to look at my life and see a man who had everything." He swallowed. "I think I wanted what you gave me more than I wanted to know you." That admission did not heal me, but it freed me from the last soft lie I had been holding. He had not lost his way for a moment. He had loved the ease, the house, the dinners, the quiet labor, the status, and the feeling of being central. He had loved the lifestyle around me more than the woman inside it. I reached into my bag and placed an envelope on the table. Inside was the settlement proposal Marlene had prepared. My position was clear. The Lake House Investment Company, trust, and separate portfolio remained mine, supported by documentation. Joint assets would be divided properly. I would not seek revenge through his income, and I would not purchase peace by giving him property he had never owned. Warren read the pages slowly. His face changed as he saw how little drama was left for him to create. "You already decided," he said. "You did that," I answered. "I am only finishing it cleanly." He asked whether there was any way back. I looked at the man who had once called me nothing, who had driven to my lake house with another woman to celebrate replacing me, and I felt no hatred. That surprised me. Hatred would have tied me to him. What I felt was distance. "No," I said. "There is no way back to a marriage where you had to lose the house before you remembered I was a person." 3 weeks later, Warren signed the settlement agreement in Marlene's office. The divorce still required filing, review, and court approval, but the real fight had ended. By then Janessa had removed herself from his life with impressive speed. The apartment she had offered him suddenly felt temporary. Her messages slowed, then stopped, except for one that Marlene obtained through discovery because Warren had printed it in anger and left it with other papers. "I did not sign up to watch you beg for things you do not own," Janessa wrote. It was cruel, but it was honest. She had wanted a finished throne, not a man standing outside a locked gate. Warren was not ruined financially. His earnings remained substantial, and men like him often land on their feet. But his professional standing took a visible bruise. Clients still hired him, yet partners questioned him more. Friends who had once repeated his version of our marriage began calling me, not for gossip, but because the facts had embarrassed them too. One colleague's wife told me, "We let him make you small in rooms where you were the only reason the room existed." I appreciated the apology, but I did not need it to move forward. The public consequence was not that Warren lost everything. It was that people finally stopped accepting his performance as proof. The consequences at the firm did not explode in one dramatic announcement. They spread the way professional doubt usually spreads, through closed doors, shorter meetings, and invitations that stopped arriving. Warren was removed from a client pitch involving a major estate dispute because a senior partner quietly decided the optics were poor. Janessa was reassigned from 2 high-profile matters after Human Resources reviewed her messages and concluded she had used firm time and firm systems to assist Warren's personal scheme. No one needed to shout. In rooms where reputation mattered, the silence did enough damage. The same people who once laughed politely when Warren reduced me to a background figure now wondered what else his confidence had caused him to misread. I spent the next year changing the lake house into something that belonged only to my future. I did it slowly and properly with permits, architects, contractors, staff, and a non-profit partnership Marlene helped review. Part of the estate became a retreat space for women who needed quiet after rebuilding their lives. Another section became a gallery for local artists from Chicago, Milwaukee, and Madison. Twice a year, I hosted fundraising dinners on the grounds, not the stiff dinners I once arranged for Warren's career, but warm evenings where women spoke honestly about money, work, fear, and beginning again. Otis still managed the property, steady as ever, and Marlene visited often as a friend. Nearly a year after the gate confrontation, Warren drove along the Lakeside Road because a client meeting in Milwaukee had ended early and traffic sent him that way. He later told Marlene he did not plan to stop. He only slowed when he saw the new sign at the entrance and guests walking across the grounds. I was near the water that afternoon, laughing with an artist whose work had just sold for more than she expected. I never saw Warren's car through the trees. I am glad I did not. Some endings do not need witnesses. He had already seen enough of what he gave away. My piece did not arrive like music. It came in ordinary pieces. The first night, I slept without listening for his car. The first dinner I hosted without arranging my words around his mood. The first morning I walked to the water and realized the silence did not feel empty. I did not build my new life to punish Warren or impress anyone who had underestimated me. I built it because it was mine, and because I had spent too many years making room for a man who mistook my restraint for dependence. I also returned to architecture, not in the hungry way I once imagined when I was younger, but on my own terms. I designed the retreat rooms myself, choosing wide windows, warm wood, quiet reading corners, and pathways that led guests naturally toward the water. Every decision felt like reclaiming a language I had set aside for too long. One evening, a young business owner stood in the finished gallery and said the building felt as though it had been waiting for me. I smiled because she was wrong in the most beautiful way. I had been waiting for myself. The building had only been patient enough to hold the space until I arrived. The night Warren told me I was not his wife anymore, he believed he was taking my future with him. At the gate, he learned he could not enter a life just because he had once been welcomed into it. In the cafe, he learned that missing comfort is not the same as loving a person. And in the year that followed, I learned that some doors do not close to trap you outside. They close to keep what is sacred safe. Warren did not take anything from me when he walked away. He simply left behind the woman whose quiet strength had built the life he mistook for his own. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.